Welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to What's the Point? Most of the people listening here know or have someone that is affected directly or indirectly by alcoholism and or addiction. And my guest today is an expert in how to deal with that situation. His name is Harold Long. Hi, Harold. Welcome.
Welcome, Bill. Thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for your time. Harold has an extensive background in theology, recovery studies, behavioral science. He has well over 40 years of personal experience in helping people recover, being advocate for people in recovery, learning about the keys to recovery for the people that need the recovery, but also for the people affected in their life. With that, I'll just say that Harold brings a wealth of knowledge. I want you as listeners to be open-minded to what we have to say today, because it's going to bring both insight and help for you and people that you know. Importantly, Harold has just released a book called The Big Delusion, Shattering the Delusions of Alcoholism and Addiction. How to get that will be in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, it's right here on the screen. It's a fabulous book. And with that, I'm going to just ask Harold to give us an introduction, give us some insight, Harold, into the making of this book and what all is involved in it.
All right, great, Bill. Well, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for people tuning into the show and supporting this podcast and what that brings into the world itself. The Big Delusion, Shattering the Delusions of Alcoholism and Addiction, is a body of work that's really come to fruition over a 30-year period, almost 40. I was able to embrace recovery for good, finally, at least for today, in 1987. But early in the 90s, when I really came all the way in and set all the way down and committed to a life of recovery, and my life started to really take off. I worked a lot in the Department of Corrections, not for them directly, but as a volunteer. And one of the people that was significant in that work is a woman who's retired now. Her name was Nancy McCarthy, but Nancy was the director of probation and parole for the state of Missouri. She was also the ward administrator for one of the 500-bed facilities in the city of St. Louis. I mentored her brother, who's since passed away, unfortunately, but he passed away due to something other than alcoholism and addiction, another disease. But Nancy was instrumental in inviting me and a few others to come and to do some work with probation and parole officers, helping educate them about what's the fundamentals behind an active alcoholic and addict, especially somebody who's incarcerated and coming to the streets with a recidivism rate of 60-70%. Wow. How can the probation and parole professional better understand who they're working with? So this original body of work started, the original workshop that I wrote for it was called The 5 Big Lies of Alcoholism and Addiction. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, this body of work has manifested and grew and prospered to what it is today, and then to this body of work that you see that you held up so graciously. And this is it, The Big Delusion. Mm-hmm. So this is really almost, well, it's close. It's 35 years in the making that came out. And I've been doing workshops on this, the oral piece of this for a long time. It was a few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, where I did this in a person who was a editor and publisher for a recovery newspaper, said, "Hey, do you have anything like that in writing? Because that what you just shared blew me away in the workshop." Well, I didn't have anything formal other than my notes and the manuscript. I had an outline for this book, kind of making, but I hadn't really got into it as deep as I needed to. But I said I would throw together an essay. So I threw that essay together that was relevant to what they were looking for, and they published it over the course of a year. They just took different segments of it. But from that really became the formality for the book. And there was a lot of requests from around the globe for the essay. People were doing small group studies with it, and just really get in. And it isn't like it's new information. The information's always been there. It's just the way it's packaged, articulated, and presented that I think it makes it unique and effective for a lot of people to get into a rhythm, to really understand who we were before we ever really engaged and got enslaved to alcoholism and addiction, who we were, what was going on, and really naming that, trying to put some name to it and some teeth to it. Yeah. But then the progression of the illness. And then once, if we're fortunate, because what people don't realize is 90% of the people who have alcoholism and addiction will never experience recovery at any level. They'll never be in a treatment center. They'll never sit into a room of recovery. They'll never be in an intervention. 90% of the people. But out of that 10% that do show up, they go to treatment, sometimes multiple times, or they walk into a recovery meeting off the streets, either as somebody who's trying to figure it out, or somebody who's a family member trying to figure it out. Different fellowships for that. But that small percentage, only a small, probably right around 3%, will ever have any considerable longevity and quality recovery in their life. And the reason, and the question is, well, why? Why is it so difficult for people to get sober? Well, it's because of what I wrote about in the book. It's the delusions that they have to overcome. And most of them are operating at a subconscious level. So they don't even realize there's no language to it. They don't know how to frame it. And hopefully this book does that. Hopefully that when they're reading it, it puts some, you got to name it before you can claim it, but hopefully it puts some teeth to it where they can really lean into it, resonate, and go, yeah, this is making sense to me. And giving them an open mind and a willingness and a level of honesty maybe they didn't have before. But most importantly, the hope that, man, if these people like Harold and others can do this, then surely, I mean, if I come all the way in, sit all the way down and commit to staying, and staying is the hard part, that maybe I can have a similar experience. So that's how we got to this body of work and where it's at today.
That's quite the journey, and I suspect that during all of your work and all of your heartfelt efforts to help those suffering, probably it took a long time for the thought of publishing a book to even come into play in your mind. So I'm glad that newspaper kind of planted the seed and that your essay planted the seed. Let me ask you this, Harold. Who is the book directed at? Is it the person that needs to or has an opportunity to get out of the slave mentality that alcoholism and drug addiction brings? Or is it the people that love them and want to try to give them some insight? How does this book reach people?
Well, I think it speaks to a wide array of an audience. The question always is that if you're going to write a book, why are you writing it? Why do you need to write it? Is there already a book out there that's going to say what you're going to say? Are you just saying, repeating? And so I think that always, if you're listening, you have a desire to write a book, you got to start with that question: why do I want to write this?
Mm-hmm.
But if what you're trying to project and what you're trying to get out there really isn't out there and correlated the way that that it's correlated, then it might be time to think about that and seek wise counsel. So I sought a lot of wise counsel and direction from a lot of people in my circles before I took this leap of work. It's a lot of work. I can just tell you that's a lot of effort to do it. But the audience it's more than the alcoholic and addict who still suffers. It's more than just the parent, the sibling, the spouse, the significant other, or the employer, or somebody in an uncle and aunt, somebody in the inner circle. It's way more than that. It's about the different people that have twisted perceptions, if you would, or they don't have real clarity on what alcoholism actually is, and addiction. So whether you're coming from a place of reason, or you're coming from a very legalistic religious framework, or a framework of religion at all, just a spirituality mentality, a mindfulness per se, or however you view alcoholism and addiction, whatever belief system you might have, it really speaks to all those platforms and all those people to help us better understand what the person is up against.
So
and that's really that's what it's about. So it's a wide array.
Yeah, and I was going to comment on that, Harold, because the way you've presented this in your work, is some of it already published out there? Yeah, it certainly is. And like you said, there's not necessarily all new information, but there's a good bit of new information. It's also packaged in a different way, and it's broader in its spectrum. What I love about it is you are not inviting or insisting that anyone take one particular view, be it a view of reason, be it a view of faith-based. You lay it out and give people the option to how they can relate to it. Was that part of the purpose and how you came up with the book?
Yeah, because I think the problem in the world, for people, especially in the West, is that our egos are so big that we're certain about everything. And it's that certainty that keeps us from embracing anything. And in what the world of recovery invites is to leave this. If you want to frame it in a box, we walk through life with this box where certain God exists, or there's only one way to know God, or God doesn't exist. There's never been a God. Whatever you're certain about, you have it. You have this belief system that you can't even prove. It's not airtight. You can't prove it. Whether you're going to come from faith, you're going to come from reason, but whatever it is, this certainty about whatever's in this box and how it relates to me is that what I would call the spiritual separation. It's that separation is that I would believe is the limit of every human being, but the alcoholic and addict is an extreme, because if it's not dealt with, will lead to their demise most likely. So that's what the book says. Let's have an open mind. Let's be willing to lay aside the box of certainty, whether I'm coming from a very, devout religious experience or tradition, or I'm just a person of reason. I've never believed. I don't come from that way of life. I'm a person of reason. You got to be able to think your way through life. It's got to make sense, in my mind, or I can't put my arms around it. Wherever you're coming from, this book is going to invite you to a conversation. And it's not asking you to buy everything in the book, but it is asking you to be honest with yourself and open enough to engage the material and see what happens to you on the backside of it. If it doesn't open you up a little bit and maybe give you some hope for yourself and for the person that you love, but there's probably more to this than just, hey, just put down the needle, put down the pipe, put down the booze. That there's a lot more going on here that has to be dealt with, and it's not just at a cognitive level. It's not at a conscious level. It's most of it's happening at a subconscious level, and we don't even see it. So that's who is inviting and talking to.
That's so well said. One thing I've learned through the years is that it's important for me to accept that someone has a position, has what they believe, what they are putting, and what they are wanting me to read and take in. And I don't have the obligation to accept it if I'm reading it or listening to it, but I sure owe it to myself to at least listen and accept that there's something out there that I either agree with or maybe I don't, to give myself the opportunity to open my mind and to learn something new. The other people that I think could very easily benefit from this are people that don't believe they have anyone directly in their life, but just getting a better understanding of what the person, what it's like to be the person addicted, whether it be alcohol or drugs. Just gaining that understanding of humanity, I think, is important, and that's also pretty well written out here, I believe.
Yeah, and I just try to share. I don't tell my whole story, but I share enough pieces of it as we walk through. And there's 6 big delusions that I really hit on, and then I talk about some other topics in the latter part of the book, the other 8 chapters. But the first 6 really diving into that. I share parts of my story for identification, but just to show that the struggle is real, but more importantly that there's hope. And that there is hope, but you have to overcome a lot of delusions. And these delusions are what I had to overcome. And I believe every alcoholic and addict suffers from these delusions at varying degrees, but they all, if they look at it honestly, they suffer from them. And it's like, but to uncover, discover, discard, as some famous people in recovery would say, it is important to do that. And we need help to do that. We need language to do that. And so this book hopefully puts some language to that angst, that there isn't a person that doesn't get behind a podium or sit in a small group in a treatment center or sit in front of a peer counselor or a counselor for the first time and say something to this effect. I've always felt like a square peg trying to fit in a round hole. I've always felt like everybody else had the answers to the quiz but me. I always felt like I came from a different planet. I look around my siblings and don't understand that we're raised in the same house because how I connect with the world. That somehow or another they're saying that. Yeah. And so what is that? That angst. And the delusion behind it is if you ask them how they're doing face to face, they'll go, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm fine. But they're really not. But they don't have any way to articulate that. And so I, just over time, it just morphed into, what do you call that? Angst. And I just call it the delusion of inequality. The delusion that who I am is not enough. And that's a real struggle for a lot of people.
That is so valid, and that is true in my experience, Harold, with people that are addicted, people that are in recovery, just people in general. It's always, how do I fit in? Do I fit in? Take a walk with us through the different delusions. Give us kind of an overview of each of them as we go through.
Well, yeah, the way the book's laid out is I tell you why I wrote the book. I have a disclaimer in it, and then I go through some definitions, and it's in that order for a reason. Typically you find definitions in the back, but I put them in the front because I think it's important to understand my mindset,
Yeah.
and my experience, what I've seen, what I've heard, what I've experienced before you dive into the rest of the chapter. But once you dive into it, it's going to start with the delusion of inequality. And this is a delusion that I believe all human beings suffer from. And Charles Taylor, who I quote a lot in the book, who's a Canadian philosopher, who wrote several books, but he wrote a couple of big books. Sources of the Self is probably his most famous book. He's since passed on, and it's a 600-page magistrate book, if you would. It's really a philosophy book written for philosophers, so it's pretty deep. But his work in studying the human psyche and just the human experience, especially in Western culture, he would argue all day that he would call it the delusion of inequality, but he might call it the fractured self. That'd be the language Charles would use, this fractured self. I think I looked it up in the book. That's how he would describe it. That I can in the extreme levels, it can fluctuate in a day. I can go from a hero to a zero in less than an hour because of this delusion. And social media took that and put it on steroids.
Oh boy, did it.
Do I have enough likes? Do I get enough views? Do I get enough popularity? How come, this? How come they didn't like my post? I mean, and there's a lot of people today, as you're listening, that will commit acts of self-harm, maybe even fatal ones, just because of this delusion. And they will alter their bodies. They will change their zip codes. They will do a lot of harmful things to the self and the people they love just because of this delusion. It's a very powerful delusion. And guess what? Just because you name it and claim it, and you start to have some victory over it, it's still there. And there was a time when what you thought of me paralyzed me. Absolutely paralyzed me. Today, it doesn't paralyze me, but I still care about what you think. I want to be respected. I do want to be loved. I do want to have integrity and be thought well of. But there's still sometimes, if I'm not spiritually centered, my mind can just take me off in a rabbit hole, and I can be overly obsessive, not sleep, go through the whole night worried about what somebody else or a group of people. It's kind of like you could be speaking to a group of 2,000, 1,990 of them come and tell you, hey, that was great. That one who says, yeah, I'm really struggling with all that. And you don't think about the 1999, you think about the one. And that's the delusion of inequality. That's how powerful it truly is. And that's a powerful delusion, but having some language to it. Because when I spent a lot of time in prisons and in treatment center places and have for over 35 years, every week, 75% of my time's in those spaces, I hear this delusion every single day. Thousands of people every year. And none of them will ever call it the delusion of inequality. But when you say that, I don't know how many people come up and go, man, I wrote that down, because it just gives language to this angst that we just have a hard time trying to describe. And so that's what that first delusion is. And then I tell a little bit of my story of how that played out and some of the really poor decisions, because I can promise you, most people wouldn't want a data cord plugged in and graphs to show how many poor decisions they made in their life. Relationships, they quit jobs, they started jobs, they broke up with her, they broke up with him, they got in with him, they got in with her. They moved from here to move to that. Just the decisions they made are like based on this delusion. And the reality is probably a third, if not more of that, it's not even true. But they made decisions based on it.
One thing that strikes me, Harold, in your comment, first of all, it's 100% true that if from personal experience and speaking with others, if 1,999 people say great talk and one person says, man, that was weak, it's the one person we focus on. But what you just said points out having people come up and say, I get that. I understand that now. The way you said that, just getting that awareness that they're not alone is maybe a tiny step towards realizing that our fractured self may not be as fractured as we think. So I'm glad to hear that awareness is getting out to people.
But it is self. It's extreme self-focus. I mean, Charles Taylor would argue, many great philosophers in today would argue, Jordan Peterson for sure would argue that the human being and all people will spend the vast majority of our lives thinking about ourselves.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we just exhaust ourselves. But the alcoholic and addict is the extreme level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an extreme level of self-reflection that just nonstops. And it's just, we get tired of it. And then somebody one day says, here, smoke some of this, take some of these, drink some of this. And we do it, and we eventually have the release, you know, the magic of that experience, the dopamine rush, if you would, that changes everything in our life. Because if that angst, so that delusion of inequality is this, and it's just nonstop, and I take some substance, and it doesn't make it go away, but it makes it tolerable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game changer.
Yep.
And for every alcoholic and addict out there, they know what I'm talking about. They know that moment, they can almost point to it. They can say that was the moment that changed everything. And then they sell their life out. It's like, I'm going to shift everything in my life. It's not just the effect from the dopamine rush, but it's the lifestyle around it. It's all of that,
Mm-hmm.
because it creates a false sense of equality, which is what we're really craving anyway. Because
Right.
the delusion of inequality is for an alcoholic addict, it's an extreme thing going on, two things at once. One, it's like if I walk into the room, there's part of me that wants everybody to come and go, hey, Harold, we think you're great. High five me, and then leave me alone for the rest of the night. And the other half of me wants to be left alone altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And those two dynamics are going on at the same time. And when you're going through life thinking you're better than or less than, and it's happening at the same time, that creates a lot of disturbance and a lot of mental anguish and pain in your life. And then somebody hands you an outside vice, and you take it, and it numbs that. I'm probably going to do it again. And if I'm alcoholic addict, it's going to stick its teeth in me. And then the phenomenal craving comes in, the mental obsession, and I can't stop. And but it all stems from that. So this is the foundation. This is the cornerstone, the keystone of all the other delusions.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with that delusion, that who I am is not enough. And that's a powerful delusion. Every human being suffers from it at some level, the alcoholics and addicts to an extreme level. And being able to pull the blinds back on that, shine the spotlight of truth, and see it for what it is. It's revolutionary. It doesn't take it away just because you name it and claim it. But at least you know that you're not alone, to your point.
Right.
But what do you do with that? Well, first off, you got to see where it took you. Where it took us, just to the bottle, to the pill, to the dope house, to the bar, wherever. That's where it took us. And if we're alcoholic and addict, once we cross that line, once you go from a cucumber to a pickle, well, friends, there's no going back. It's an old silly illustration, but it's a powerful one, because it's really the truth. There's no going back. But most people will go down fighting, trying to go back. And if you can get free from that, but that's the second delusion that I'm not alcoholic and addict. And it's way past denial. We throw the word denial around a lot in the world, in recovery circles for sure, but it's a word that got popular in the 70s and 80s. But denial is like, I know the bookcase is behind Bill, but I'm not going to look at it. The truth's in the room, but I'm not going to look at it. The truth that I got problems, the truth that I'm a little bit out of control is there. But alcoholism and addiction is way past denial. Denial is there, no question, but it's way past that. It's sitting right across from me, looking me right in my eyes, and I can't differentiate the truth from the false. I can't see myself for what I really am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that delusion is why most alcoholics and addicts will burn their life into the ground to the point of no return, because they cannot see themselves for what they really are. And that, my friends, is a powerful delusion. And most will never overcome it. But if you can get past it, then the other four that are coming behind it are doable. But you got to get past that one. That's 100% game. If you're not in on that one, all bets are off.
It strikes me, Harold, that there are there's a tremendous amount of people, addicts, alcoholics, if not every one of them, that go to extreme measures to manipulate or justify or alter, like you said, the truth that's right in front of them, to justify, to make it fit into their perception. Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is. And if you got resources, well, it just magnifies that delusion. So if you got some resources where you can keep the fire burning, where you can justify, hey, I got the job, I got stuff, I got a car, I still got my license, I bought my way out of everything, whatever. But if you peel back the blinds and you look out in the landscape and you see mountain wreckage, all the hearts you broke, all the bridges you burnt, that mountain's there, whether you got resources or you're a Skid Row, the resources are there. When at the end of the day, when the cup is dry, we all show up at the same watering hole, looking for something else outside of ourselves to take away the pain that's created by the human experience and definitely the delusion of inequality. We're all looking for that. But when you got resources, your ego is going to tell you, it's not as you got it. You'll figure it out. Well, I mean, you're smart. You're a smart person. You got an education. And if you're an alcoholic and addict on Skid Row, your mind's already convinced you there's no hope for you ever. You're never going to be more than what you already are. So why even try? And it says those two extremes. So that narrative can say, you got it. You're a smart guy. You're going to figure it out. Just hang in there. Yeah, you had a few bumps in the road. Yeah, but you'll be all right. Just hang in there. And then if you're on the other spectrum, it doesn't matter what you think because you're hopeless. There's no hope you're ever going to be anything other than you are.
Right.
And that's why we have a recidivism rate of 60, 70% in our penitentiary system, because people have already given up before they ever get out. They haven't even started. They won't even start because they've already given up. That's why you got people that cycle in and out of treatment centers 5 times, 10 times, 15 times. And they know the drill. They go through detox and they're shoved into residential. And before they step first day into residential, they've already given up. I hear it all the time. I've already tried it. I've already been here.
Yeah.
This is my 10th time. It doesn't work for me for whatever reason. I don't know why it don't work for me, but it doesn't work for me. And this delusion's real. So whatever spectrum you fall into, it's still the same dilemma. It's still the same delusion. It just comes at you from a lot of different variances and depending on which lens you're looking through. But if you look through the spotlight of truth, whether you're on the upper scale of it, the high bottom scale of it, or the low bottom scale of it, it doesn't matter. The delusions are what they are. And if you're powerless, you're powerless, and there's no gain in control.
The recidivism rate that you mentioned is just larger than one would hope it would be. But I'm going to tie this back to something I said earlier. As I see, part of the benefit of this book is reaching people that are in the institutions, be it the jail and prison system, be it the recovery system, to gain a better understanding of what those people are going through, to help them, hopefully help them understand that they're not at the end of their rope, and that when they get out, their only chance isn't just to go back to where they were. Is there a chance that this can help people in institutions just to gain more knowledge of those that they deal with?
Yeah, I mean, the first books off the press went to a couple of offenders inside a maximum security prison, just for their critique of it and for them to be able to read it and relate to it. It's written a lot about. There's stories about those people in this book. But yeah, I mean, the delusion of inequality, and you'll see me quote several different famous people about equality quotes, if you would. But the agency that we give people when we see them as equals is powerful. It's one of the greatest gifts we can see people. But that's not how most people see people that are habitual felons or habitual treatment goers, been to treatment a bunch of times, been to prison, been to jail. We see them as fractured people, and it's easy to place ourselves better than them. But when you go into those spaces and you come from those spaces and you can sit with those people, you can help them overcome. If you can get past the delusion of inequality and start to see it for what it is, it gives you some relief that, man, I'm not alone in this. But and you can overcome, the delusion that I'm not alcoholic addict. You can accept that to your core, very personal thing. Nobody can do that for you. But if you accept that to the core, I know I'm powerless. I don't need anybody else to convince me. If I don't change, I'm going to burn my life completely to the ground. Then you're up against this next delusion. And these next two delusions, and I'll speak about the next three, actually, 4, but the next 2 for sure, are really relevant to people that are just a hopeless recycle of mental institutions, treatment centers, homelessness, or it's the incarcerated world. They're inside a mental institution, or they're in and out of county jails, or they're inside a longer stay in the Department of Corrections. But this mindset is the delusion of victimization. I'm here because of you. My life sucks because of you. And though we might not be that blunt, come out and say it, if you sit back and really reflect on your life, you see that that's the case. It was the case against me. Victimization had me by the throat. But here's the problem with that, being an alcoholic and addict. If you have that mindset, if you have that delusion going on, here's the sad part about it. I can drink myself to death, and it's not my fault. I can blow my veins out. I can blow my lungs out. I can blow my nostrils out. I can blow my brains out, and it's not my fault. I can sit in a 9x7 or 10x6 jail cell for the rest of my earthly life, and it's not my fault. And that delusion is powerful. And there's a lot of people listening to this right now that have that victimhood going on, or a segment of their life. that they may have some growth here, but they're still hanging on that one thing. And let's be real, most alcoholics and addicts have suffered a lot. Some of them more than others, but they've suffered all kinds of trauma, physical, mental, sexual, go on down the line. A lot of it's just internal, just from the delusion of inequality itself. It's the self-manifestation of that's created so much of it. But externally, a lot of people have suffered a lot of things. There's some hard stories out there, hard stories. And when you're victimized like that, and then you got this addiction going, it's really easy to point, well, I'm here because of that. And to take ownership for your own life, to break through enough, to humble yourself enough, to be honest, open-minded, willing to shine the spotlight of truth on your own life for just a moment, and take, even if the percentages are not in your favor, it's 80% them, 20% me, and we'll just play along and say that's the case. Until I take ownership for that 20%, I'm doomed. And so with the right people in my life, I can start to see the truth about myself and take ownership. And when I do, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. What changed my life at big time is overcome it. But then you're right up against the next delusion. It's like, yeah, okay, great. So I know I'm powerless over alcohol and all mind-altering substances. I know that I play a big part, and I'll take huge responsibility for it. But let's just be real with each other. I broke so many hearts. I burned so many bridges. There's little hope in my life that we're going to really amount to anything. So why even try? That delusion of impossibility is what I would call that, is why there's a recidivism rate of 60, 70%, because people have already given up. They're convinced the world's given up, but then they've given up on themselves. And more importantly, if there is a higher power, which I would argue there is, but let's just say there is, that higher power is given up on them as well. So everybody's against them. And so, and if I get out of here and I don't have any resources, I don't have a place to stay, I don't have any money, I don't have a license, I don't have a job, now I got a felony, there are multiple felonies, maybe there's some serious crimes involved there, I'm doomed, so why even try? Why even do any of this stuff? Because it's all for nothing. And those delusions, friends, so if you're sitting in those spaces or you have that's delusional. I know it doesn't sound like it's your reality. I get it. I've been there, done it, but I'm just telling you it's delusional. It's not true. But the stranglehold that has on so many people today in the world, it's deep. It's deep. So those are two big ones that people that are just convinced that my life's never going to be anymore. It's your fault to start with. And even if I get past it, it's too much to overcome. The mountain's too high. When you look out at Mount Wreckage, it looks like Mount Everest in the background.
I love the phrase Mount Wreckage. So again, my guest today is Harold Long. He's the author of the book, The Big Delusion, Shattering the Delusions of Alcoholism and Addiction. I encourage you very strongly to grab a copy of this book. It'll be in the show notes how to get it. You can also go to thebigdelusion.com, I believe is the right website address.
Right.
And there's tons of information about the book and about Harold. Harold, the delusions are big. They're powerful. They are powerful in virtual, I use the term loosely, handcuffs, or a kind of a prison cell that people can put themselves in because of the delusion. Let's move on, if we can, to what do we do about it?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. And I think the first thing is just wrapping your mind around, at least conceptually, what these delusions are. And then asking yourself, honestly, the way the book's written, it'll have a synopsis at the end of each chapter. They have a point to ponder, and then it'll have at least one reflection question. In the back of the book, in the appendix, there's 3 more questions you can answer. And then you can go to the website and get a leadership guide and a participant workbook, which are all e-based, and because it's meant for you to have a workbook to actually, notebook to go through it with a group. But sit down and really unpack these delusions and be honest with yourself. No, nothing counts but thoroughness and honesty, and just seeing how these delusions have impacted your life and how they've restricted you, but also to see how many really poor decisions you made in your life as a result of it. Many that were based off total fabrication. It wasn't even a true narrative, but you bought into the narrative. And you made a lot of poor choices off it. And I share some of my hardships in that story. So number one is just obviously, hopefully get the work and start to just read it and reflect to it, but then get somebody to help you go on this journey. Find a recovery community wherever that works for you, whether it's in a 12-step format or whether it's in a church setting, whether it's even in a more in a secular setting like SOS or Smart Recovery, wherever you can thrive, wherever you can uncover, discover, and understand how these delusions are impacting your life. In any one of those settings, you can start to do that and break free and realize you're going to need help, to get out of the hole. You cannot get out of the hole without your help. Somebody's going to have to put a rope down to you, and you can't get out without it. I mean, it's like plastic or all around the walls. You cannot get out. You're going to have help to get out there. So number one is who can that be? And if you don't know, then just reach out to the recovery community, reach out to some professional therapists or whoever, that you need somebody that's willing to go on this journey with you. And the way I like to explain it, Bill, is it's like a 10,000 piece puzzle. This is the easiest way to summarize this. And I left this a little bit up in the book. I think I got one paragraph on it, but I use this illustration a lot. But you show up in treatment, and like, if you just visualize a plastic Ziploc bag, there's 1,000-piece puzzle in it. This is my life, and there's pieces missing. I'm ashamed that my life's in shambles. I'm hopeless because there's pieces missing that I know will never be put back. And I show up in these spaces, in these places, whether it's jail, whether it's prison, whether it's treatment center, wherever it's at, I show up. And the insane part about it is that most people will leave with it. Even though they're invited to dump it out on the table and invite up to help them put it back together, their pride, their fear, and their twisted perceptions that are delusions of themselves, the world system, etc., and God, or higher power, is so twisted that they'll never do it. But if you can do it, and you're willing to say, hey, will you go on this journey with me, Bill? And Bill says, yeah, I'll go on that journey with you. And he sits right next to you, shoulder to shoulder, not above you, not below you, but shoulder to shoulder, equality. Dump it out. And you dump that puzzle out. And it's not just Bill, but it's Bill's influence and his circle of people. And the next thing you know, you got a whole circle of people around the table, and everybody's got their hands into it. And it starts to take shape, and you start to have a little hope. And then one day, sooner than later, it all starts to come together. And then pieces that are missing, somehow mysteriously they get filled. I would say it's divine intervention. You can say it's just the response to reasonable actions, whatever works for you. But those gaps get filled. The impossible becomes possible. 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. And the spiritual mathematics kick in. And then you got a life, a storybook life, that you're ready to frame and hang on the wall. And that's what has to happen. That's how you make it life. You're going to need help. You're going to need community. You're going to need connection.
Yeah, so just a few comments on what you said, because what you said is so true and so powerful, Harold. It's got to get to the point that someone realizes that they're in a hole and they need help to get out. But the first step that someone hopefully can do is to quit digging. At some point we need to quit digging. Otherwise, the help we need is going to be that much harder to gain. But having two more things. Reaching out to someone helps us understand that we don't have that first delusion you talked about of not being whole, not being good enough, not being acceptable, because someone's with us, right? But the other thing is, what you just said, no one has to buy all of that on the first day. That's what can happen. But just understanding that some of the pain can go away. And then I think everything else can start to evolve and start to gain an understanding. And that happens when you're working with someone like you have in your book, put examples of, hey, brother, I've been there. So you can put some credence in what I'm saying. That's all powerful stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's true. And so the way I would frame that, Bill, and this is for anybody, any human being, is to go at the process of transformation, whether you're alcoholic or not. You're just stuck in life and you need a new experience. And there's lots of experiences out there you're invited to many. Most you'll say no to, because this box of certainty that we talked about earlier is preventing you from saying that. So what I would say is to replace the word certainty with confidence. And what I mean by that is, if I was going to get on a plane and fly from here to Dubai, I know you travel a lot, but if I was going to fly here to Dubai, see our friend Eric, for example, and we're going to fly to Dubai, am I certain that plane's not going to crash? No, I'm not certain of that, by no means. But I have enough confidence in the airline, the pilot, and everybody else involved that I can get there. So based on confidence, I'm going to go get on that plane. If I was going to drive from here to LA, am I certain that I'm not going to break down or have a car crash or be hijacked or any of that? No, I'm not certain, but I have enough confidence that I can do that today. And that's what I would say approach any kind of resolution in your life, personal development, personal growth, but definitely recovery for sure. If you're trying to get out from underneath the enslavement of king alcohol and all mind-altering substances, to approach it with confidence, and confidence in what? Confidence in those who went before you.
Yeah.
The millions of people that are ahead of you in this, that what they're saying is true. But but leaving aside that certainty and just going with confidence. And if you do that, here's what I'll promise you: on the other side of that experience, on the other side of that journey, you will have the experience you need to have lasting and permanent recovery. It's not about getting you to heaven or eternal life or salvation. There's already a best-selling book written all about that, and lots of people out there to talk to you about it. This is about trying to overcome the big delusions of alcoholism and addiction that will destroy 97% of the people that have. That's what it's about. Is how do I overcome that? And you're going to have to go with confidence. You're just going to have to go with some confidence, not certainty, but just confidence. And if you do that, it'll make a big difference in how your life turns out.
So very true. The example of having confidence that your trip will be successful is a great one. And add to that the fact that looking at historical, how many flights made it safely to Dubai? Thankfully, everyone I've been on. How many road trips have made it successfully to Los Angeles? How many, whatever it is, have been successful? So at the start here, Harold, you gave some numbers that could be taken as kind of dire as far as success rate of recovering from alcoholism or addiction. But if you get that percentage out and put it into actual numbers, there's millions of people that have recovered. There are millions of people who have been able to, some degree or another, lose that enslavement to alcoholism and addiction and get better. So there's enough facts out there that confidence makes sense.
Yeah, and you just have to overcome the delusions. And I explain it this way to a lot of people. Sitting in, when I go speak inside a treatment center, which is every week, but I'm sitting with usually a rotation of new 50, 70 people every week. But I'll explain it this way. I'll say, look, at some point in your life, we're just going to use alcohol in this sense, but you can trade it for anything. And you walk into the bar and you say, I'd like to have one of those cold beers. What's that going to cost? What's it going to cost you $2? That don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. Then the next time you walk in and say, what is this going to cost me? What's going to cost you your career? It's going to cost you your livelihood. Yeah, that don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. And eventually, next time you walk in is, what's it going to cost? Well, it's going to cost you your family. It's going to cost you respect to your family. It's going to cost you your family. But that don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. And then the next time you walk in, what's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you your health. That don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. And then eventually you walk in, what's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you your freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. And eventually, one day you walk in, what's it going to cost me? It's going to cost you your life.
Yep.
It don't sound like too big a price to pay. I'll pay it. And it sounds totally insane when you lay it out like that. But anybody suffering from addiction or alcoholism can take that illustration and take their life, and it fits exactly like that. The cunning, baffling, powerful nature, we're willing to give it all away to get the effect produced by alcohol and drugs because of that delusion of inequality, because of the pain that just won't go away. And the crazy part about it, and this is why, it's like, yeah, those numbers are discouraging when you listen to them kind of statistics. But why is that? Well, it's because of the delusions, friends. It's because of delusions. If we walked into a hospital, it was a 3-tier hospital, top being terminal illness number 1, terminal illness number 2, and then you had alcoholism and addiction at the bottom. I go to terminal illness number 1 and say, hey, if you come downstairs and join this community, dump your life out on the table, and there's people that are going to get around you. We're going to have some coffee, we'll have some snacks, we'll have some laughs. You're going to have a storybook life. If you do that, they would run you over like cattle to get down there.
Mm-hmm.
If you go up to the second floor, the terminal unit number 2, and ask them the same thing, there's some of those people that would literally crawl across the floor and lick your feet for a chance to go down there. But you go to the alcoholic and addict ward, and some will flip you the bird, some will give you the Heisman, some will just sit there with their arms crossed, some will look down, and maybe one out of 33 might go up and go, hey, can you help me?
Yeah.
That's why. And why is that? Because of exactly what we're talking about, friends. It's the delusions. It's the big delusions. Why those statistics bear out. And it's sad, but that's what we have to overcome.
And delusion is rampant. We talked about that a little bit earlier, that when people in that situation look at the truth and don't see it, and we start to manipulate and delude ourselves as to what the truth really is, it gets to the point that even though what you said is at the core of most everyone is that fractured delusion that I'm not good enough, yet when it comes to you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your family, it's like, oh, well, that'll happen to other people. It won't happen to me.
Right.
And it's just, it flabbergasts me. It
Yeah,
just
it's yeah, when you got a sober mind, you're looking at it from the outside. You're like,
Yeah.
and if you don't suffer from alcoholism and addiction, you're like, what's the deal? Why are we still here? Why do we keep doing this? And their answer is, I don't know. I don't know, Dad. I don't know, spouse. I don't know, son. And the hard reality is that they don't know because it's at a subconscious level. They don't see it for what it is.
Well, as you just said, with a sober mind, it flabbergasted me. Earlier in my life, it made all the sense in the world, and the transformation and having evolved is just an absolute gift.
It
Um,
is.
and you know, I hate to sound like a bad old commercial, but it keeps on giving. Harold, we're right up against the time that I've asked you to donate, and I thank you so much, not just for the time today, but for the percentage of your life that you've committed to taking what you know, what you can learn, what you've experienced, and using it to help other people. That's just an absolute magnificent statement about the type of person you are, and also what it takes for people in alcoholism and addictive situations to realize there's help out there. There's someone that can help you out of the hole if you quit drinking.
Right.
Now, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask everyone at the end of an episode of What's the Point? And you can answer this in any context that you so choose. And the question is the title of the show. Harold, what's the point?
Well, that's a great question to sit and ponder. What is the point? What is the point of anything? What is the point of the human experience? What is the point of being sober? What is the point of being in recovery? What is the point? And I think I quoted the quote there from Mark Twain, who says, there's two important dates in your life: the day you were born and the day you figure out why. And when you start living your life, I mean, one of the big things that has to happen for anybody in recovery, and I don't care if you're the loved one of someone in recovery or you're the alcoholic addict, there has to be a transformation. If you're going to live a storybook life in any fashion, any human being, you need to move from a taker to a giver. And that transformation has to happen. And if you stay in rooms of recovery, you get with the right people, you get somebody to mentor you, walk shoulder to shoulder with you, and help you recreate your life, that will happen. And when that happens, you're going to have an experience. Jesus himself said, he was asked that very question: what are the two most important things I need to be doing? Well, love God and love yourself. As you would yourself, but love your neighbor as yourself, I should say. But he narrows it down to one at the end of his life. And he's asked, what is it? And he says, just love. Of others. And so when you can finally become an agent of that because it's been given to you, it's the only thing that alcoholism and addiction has no defense against is love. When I sit in a treatment center and I ask the question, what are your two biggest fears? I can tell you what they are before they ever say it. Number one, relapse. And that's all because of what we talked about today. Number two is, I don't know how I'm going to recreate what I've experienced here. They'll never call it love. They may call it community, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, connection, a friendship. We're bonded together, this pack mentality. They'll never call it love. It's the ingredient that's almost hidden or obsolete altogether inside the life of an addict alcoholic. And the delusions keep it that way. And so what's the point of all of it is to go from a taker to a giver, and then to live a life of dying to yourself and living for something bigger than your own, which I would say is God's ambitions for your life. And doing that fundamentally, and I would close with this in 4 ways. Number one is live a life of humility. And that doesn't mean you don't go out and have a good time. It doesn't mean you don't write a book. It doesn't mean you don't host a podcast. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that that any direction you have in your life, anything that you can point to that's positive has come definitely for something bigger than yourself. Because we have a resume, what our lives look like when we're running the show. So it's staying humble to that truth, that I'm here because of something bigger than me. period, number one. Number two is to live a life of self-sacrifice. That I'm going to give up my life and my time, my talent, my energy, my money, whatever, my sources for something that not that they deserve it, but that they need it. To live a life of other-centeredness would be the third point. To be focused on what I can contribute to the world, not what I can extract from it. By default, our minds are on WIIFM. What's in it for me? I wake up every day, that the station's right there. I got a choice, crank that up and get into what's in it for me. And some days I do that. But what I've been taught to do, what's worked really well for almost 4 decades, is let's change the channel. Is what can I contribute to life? What am I going to do today that's going to make a big difference? Not only how my life turns out, but somebody else's life. So living a life, other-centered mindset. And lastly is to go out and love everybody, including the people I just don't care. And really, so those are the 4, what I would call the 4 fundamentals of living a happy, joyous, and free life. To live a life of freedom and to have a storybook life. And if you do that, well, you and I could sit here and trade stories all day of what that framework does for your life. So that's the point. The point is that you can become the best version of you that ever existed. You can become, an agent in the world that makes a difference in not just in one life, but dominoes in ways you'll never ever see in the lives of many. That's the point. The point is to have a storybook life.
Well, I tell you what, Harold, I am so grateful to have you accepted my request to be a guest. I'm grateful for everything that you offered today and what you've done for the past nearly 40 years. Everybody, Harold Long, author of The Big Delusion, all that information is in the show notes. And when you're there, make sure you check out how to get a leadership book for small groups and how to get a journal and how to really make this book worthwhile and work harder. Harold, thank you again so much for your time. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. And we'll be back with a new episode soon. Thanks and bye-bye.
God bless everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise there is value to be gained in every one. Taking a second to rate, review, and share the show helps make us more discoverable and enables others to find out what's the point. If you'd like to learn more about Bill Ellis and his services, please visit his website, billellis.com. See you next time.